There's an enormous volume of spiritual teachings, of philosophies, of metaphysical worldviews, all these sorts of things that are inundating the spiritual marketplace. If you find yourself interested in these things and you begin to look into it, the bombardment of information is astounding. Is there an essence to it? Is there a specific objective reality that it's really about? And is this reality relatively simple? And is this reality addressable within your experience? And the answer is yes. It turns out that all spiritual teachings, all spiritual information, all yogas and spiritual practices are oriented around one thing. Or they're oriented around nothing, i.e. fantasy. But those that are genuine are oriented around experience. The real fundamental question in spirituality is, what is experience? Of course, we all unconsciously think we know what experience is. I know what experience is. It's my experience, and I'm going about my life, and I'm seeing things and doing things and acting and doing all these kinds of things. We are all very used to relating to our experience in terms of what we hold it to be, what the objects of experience and the apparent situations and entities that experience seems to apply consist of, and we orient towards these situations and entities and so on. And we largely take experience itself for granted. Experience is like a relatively clear window through which we're seeing the good stuff, the content of experience, the people, the situations, the things, the entities, our own selves, our own self-image, our own self-worth. All of these kinds of things are what tends to captivate people's attention. And people in general do not give any significant attention to experience itself. What is experience? What is experience? Studying experience itself is the short path to realization, is the short path to discovery of actuality, to discovery of what is going on, to discovery of what this is, to the discovery of what you are. And experience plainly reveals this fact because it is explicitly what it is. It is not hidden. It is not concealed. Experience reveals itself very nakedly to direct observation. But of course, there is a rub, which is that we are typically so addicted to relating to our interpretations of what our experience is that it can be very difficult to disentangle ourselves from all of that sufficiently to notice experience itself, this medium, what it is that is present here. Because we immediately jump to the content. We immediately jump to the objects and entities and people and things and situations that we think are present, and we ignore the actual medium of what is present substantially. What substance is present? Experience is a thing. Experience is not just some strange nebulous quantity that enables us to deal with things. Experience itself is a thing itself. This is a thing. Experience is a substance. Experience has a texture. Experience is a functioning. It's an actuality. It's not just a medium to enable us to get to the good stuff. And it turns out, in fact, that experience is the only good stuff that there is, because all the apparent stuff that seems to appear in experience consists of nothing but experience itself. So we are tricking ourselves when we orient to all of these supposed things and we ignore experience itself because we are bypassing the accessible actuality, the actuality of experience, which is actually present, in favor of all of these things and conditions and circumstances, which turns out are not actually present. It's very much like a dream. When you're dreaming at night, the only thing that is actually present is dreaming. There's no other thing present. There's no other entity present. There's no other substance present. And yet, when you're lost in a dream, you're typically not aware of the dream, are you? You're orienting towards the situations. What's happening? Where am I? What's going on? What am I trying to get? What am I trying to avoid? And all of that is actually completely non-existent. We wake up in the morning and we can see none of that was there. None of that was there. All it was a dream. The only thing that was present is a dream. But when you're in the dream, it can be hard to notice that because we're so rapidly seduced towards these interpretations that we are addicted to, that we are fixated on, that we give importance to. It turns out that all the circumstances and things and entities have absolutely no importance, and what actually does have importance is experience itself. That's completely backwards. That's completely upside down. You know, most people will not think like that. It is strange and alien in this culture to think like that, to propose an idea like that. But that happens to be the case. And it happens that experience itself is the very shortest path, the very shortest road, the very shortest practice that leads to the discovery of what this is. If you can be with your experience itself as it is, as a substance, as a functioning, as an actuality, you will see what it is, and you will see what you are, and you will discover your actual condition, which is astoundingly different than the normal Western worldview, than the normal materialist worldview. In Norse mythology, they had this rather nice image of the rainbow bridge. The rainbow bridge was the bridge to Valhalla, and the souls of the dead warriors would cross the rainbow bridge and go to their reward. And this is a rather nice image because your experience is the rainbow bridge to reality. Literally, the substance of your experience is the bridge to absolute, complete reality, complete transcendence, complete liberation. And one end of the bridge is right here. Where's the other end? Where's the bridge you're going to? What's the bridge to? I invite you to cross the rainbow bridge of your experience and see what it is, see where it leads to, see what it's made of. The way to explore your experience is by texture, by feeling, not by analysis, not conceptually. Experience has a texture. Experience has a quality. Well, of course, experience has all qualities, doesn't it? Because all of these qualities that we all experience in our experience, we experience color and brightness and darkness and all these things in our field of vision. We experience frequency and pitch and timbre and all these qualities in our field of sound, so on and so forth. So all of the various sense fields, or the various arbitrarily defined fields of experience, are thick with characteristics, enormous range and array of characteristics being presented. And yet, they are all nothing but experience. And it turns out they're all very similar. We're used to thinking of, perhaps, our sense fields as being very different. Light is very different than sound. Sound is very different than touch. Touch is very different than thought. But if you look very closely and unbiasedly, without preconceptions, at your experience, you will discover, I think, that, in fact, it is all the same thing. It is all present. It is all instantaneous. It's all right here, right now. It is all alive. It's vibrating. It's pulsating. Light scintillates. Touch, touch tingles. Sound, buzzes and hums, and it's moving. It's alive. It's vibrant. And all of experience shares this essentially vibrant quality, with different degrees of subtlety. Some, touch has a certain sort of you could say a coarseness perhaps, superficially. And if you go to thought is, maybe much more refined. But if you look at thought closely, you will notice the same thing. It shimmers. It's vibrant. It's alive. It's not static. You cannot find anything static within experience. You cannot find anything that is not constantly flowing, vibrating, shifting within any portion of your experience. So simply feel your experience. Be with your experience texturally. Be with your experience like you're listening to a symphony. If you're listening to a symphony, it's very abstract. It's not about anything. It's just these different textures and timbres, and the sound swells up and it goes back. And your experience is just like that. Your experience is just this constant, play of energies, and it gets, loud. Sometimes it gets quiet. It comes up. It gets sharp. It gets, you can assign all these qualities and characteristics to it, but it is what it is. And the actuality transcends our ideas of it, and above all, it is actual. These textures are actually here. They're accessible. They are present. They are explorable. You can feel them. You are feeling them. You can't not feel them. Experience is by feeling. When you say, I see light, what you're really saying is, I feel light. You feel light in your experience. When you say you hear sound, what you really mean is you feel sound. You're feeling the sound in experience. And so if you're with your experience on this level of a textural presence, of feeling, of quality, you're at the starting end of the rainbow bridge, and you can just be with these energies, these qualities, this liveliness, this actuality, and see where it comes from. Where does it go to? What is on the other side of this? What is this, the context of this presence, of this energy field that is present as your experience? And there's nothing more to spirituality than that. It's really that simple. All the rest of it is elaborations and minutiae and looking at this portion of it or that portion of it, or trying to collapse it down, or trying to morph it into putting it in certain terms or what have you. But the reality of it, the actuality of it, is simply this fact of your experience. And so if you start there, you're dealing with the mother lode, you're dealing with the essential fact, the most powerful, accessible fact And since you're dealing with the direct phenomena, you're dealing with it with maximum efficiency, just be with that, and that is the royal road, that is the short path, that is actually realization itself. Experience is reality, and when you see what experience is, that is what realization consists of. It's that simple. Not as an abstraction, not as a great thing that happens after 30,000 lifetimes, or you have to write it in capital letters and put it on your altar and bow down to it. Just the simple fact of what this actuality is what realization is all about. There's no higher realization. Jesus Christ and Buddha and Muhammad and the Dalai Lama and Deepak Chopra and John Lennon didn't know anything other than just this simple fact. This is it. And so by using this fact of your experience as your starting point, you're actually starting at the finish line. You're starting with what the answer is. It's like going to the back of the book, in your school books where all the answers are printed, and we'll start there. Well, that's a little bit easier, isn't it? You don't need to go through all the middle stuff. And this is really true. This is really, really true. Experience itself is the solution to the great dilemma of what is life, what is reality, what is spirituality. It's the means to that solution, and it is in fact the solution itself. So it's all very efficient. It's all very, it's like one of those apartments where the bathroom and the kitchen and the living room are all crammed into one room. It's very efficient. You don't need to, there's not a lot of wasted motion where you need to thrash around. It's all just right here. It's just this. Very direct, very efficient. Neat and easy. Your experience is something. What is it? What's your experience? We're used to fixating on the circumstances and entities and objects and so on that we seem to perceive within our experience, but we're generally not very used to looking at experience itself. What is experience? Experience is a substance. What is present as your experience? Right now your field of vision is present. What is it? What is it that's present?
Recognition.
No. This is not a naming. You can't name what it is. But what is it? You can feel it. You are feeling it. You can feel your experience the way you can feel the temperature of bath water by putting your hand into it. You can then apply all sorts of words and names to it, but the words and names are not the same as the feeling. The words and names don't feel like what the water feels like. And by simply feeling the water, you have a very direct, profound engagement with what it is. So the yoga of subtle energy consists of feeling your experience. Not in terms of experience itself, what is this field that is present? First of all, let's try a little experiment. Notice that there's nothing but your experience. Your experience is like a bubble that you alone inhabit. You alone are seeing it. And it appears as your field of vision. It appears as your field of hearing. It appears as your field of physical sensation. It appears as taste and smell. It appears as thought. It may appear as various other arbitrary categorizations of subtle subjective phenomena, so on and so forth. But this bubble is here right now, isn't it? It's present. This sphere, this bubble of your experience is present. It is something. It is a substance. It is a quality. you can and do feel it very directly every instant. You cannot describe accurately what it is, but you don't need to describe it because you are engaged with it directly by feeling it. So, simply feeling your experience, feeling the substance of experience itself, regardless of the things and conditions and so on that you're used to qualifying it into, just let all that be. That comes with, but that is not what it seems to be. You know, you may seem to think you're seeing a room or seeing people or seeing, computers, seeing all these things that you can classify, but all you're really seeing is vision. And all these classifications are abstract descriptions within this field of vision. It's like if you're watching TV and you could say, oh, I see on the TV screen there's a room and there's two people and they're talking and there's a car driving by. There's no car, there's no people, there's no room, it's a TV. All you're seeing is light. Likewise, right now, right here, all you're seeing is vision itself. What is it you're seeing? What is this vision you're seeing? Regardless of the things, regardless of the things you could designate appearing within it, the circumstances and objects. What is vision itself? Feel it. You are feeling it already. You are, by seeing it, you see by feeling. See is a euphemism for feeling light. You are feeling light directly with your consciousness. What is it you're feeling? What does that feel like? You are feeling sound with your consciousness. What is it that you're feeling? What is that? You're feeling sensation. What is it you're feeling? You're feeling thought. What is it you're feeling? What's thought? Thought is a presence. You know you're thinking because there's something present in your experience, just like you know you're seeing because there's something present in your experience. What is it that's present in your experience when thought is there? What is it that's present? Feel it. Feel what it feels like. What this is subtle energy. What experience is made of is arbitrarily, we can call it subtle energy. I more technically I call it radiant presence, but that's just as arbitrary a way of naming it because it's beyond words. It's not a description. It's a thing itself. This is an actuality, right? Your experience is for real. It's present. It's here, right? And this that is present is, let's say, like an energy. And simply feeling this energy directly and presently, feeling this presence, is the very highest spiritual practice. The very highest. It goes directly to realization. It goes directly to liberation. Because the nature of what this energy is intrinsically transcendental. It's infinite. And simply feeling it, it shows you that. It teaches you that. By being with it directly, it teaches you the way in which it is subtle, the way in which it is open-ended, the way in which it is infinitely multidimensional. It is unlimited, it is non-linear. And you get this very directly simply by this most intimate engagement of experience. Just feeling this field of your experience that is present. It's something, you can feel it. You are feeling it, you have always felt it. But we usually, or many of us are often distracted by our classifications and qualifications and our narrations of this is happening and that's happening and I have to do this and I don't want that. But all of that classification distracts us from what is actually present, this field, this subtle texture, this subtle textural presence of experience itself, which is a thing. It's the only thing. Experience is the only thing that's here. It's the only actuality. It's completely actual. It's absolutely actual. You know, if someone told you your experience wasn't actual, you'd laugh in their face. It's compared to what, you know? It's ridiculous. Of course experience is actual. In fact, it's the only actuality you can find. Try and find something that's actual besides your experience. Where are you going to look for it? Because this is actual, it's powerful. Because it is actual, it is efficacious. It's not a fantasy. It's not just pretending. It is for real. This energy is actually present. You are actually engaged with it. And simply noticing that fact will take you by the most direct path possible for your karma to realization, to liberation. Just by feeling what this really is. And it will very rapidly reveal itself as being completely and vastly beyond anything you've ever thought it is. It will very rapidly reveal itself as being entirely beyond the wildest human flights of fantasy or philosophy or sci-fi or speculation. What this is intrinsically miraculous, infinite, astounding, inconceivable. It actually is that. And by feeling this directly, it shows you that. It shows you what it is, it shows you how it is. You won't ever be able to say it because it doesn't translate into the paltry means of expression of human language. But you can know it most intimately. You can know it most directly. And as it shows you what it is, it will show you that you are it. It is you. It is all there is, and it is intrinsically transcendental, entirely transcendental. It literally actually is, not transcendental as some kind of a poetic metaphor, but it is limitless, it is infinite, it is based in nothing but itself. It bootstraps itself out of nothing. How weird is that? It's not sitting on anything. What's your experience sitting on right now? Here's the field of your experience. It's right here, right? What's it sitting on? What's holding it up? It's just here. It's just here. It's like a star. It's just floating in space. It's just here. Where's it coming from? Where's it go to? Where's this amazingly detailed, incredibly characteristic-rich field of subtle energies that presents constantly as you experience? Where does it come from? Where does it go to? Where is it shining from? How does it work? Just by feeling it, you can discover all of these things. Not in a way that, again, makes any sense, or that you can describe, or that is, analyzable at all conceptually, because it's not like that. But you can know it because you have its facility. You are also infinite. You are also non-linear. You are also beyond cause and effect. You are also indescribable. You're beyond description. So what you are is up to the task of meeting what this is as it actually is. And so you can know this most profoundly. And that knowledge is what is generally called realization or awakening or enlightenment or what have you in various spiritual circles among people who aren't. People who are don't call it anything. Just call it, nice day. And so this is the spiritual practice. This is the highest practice. Just feel your experience. And you will find yourself drifting off into abstraction. Don't worry about it. Just let go, drift off into abstraction, but sooner or later just come back and feel your experience. Gently, playfully. Don't be a taskmaster or a Nazi about it. Just be loose with it. Just let go and feel this flow. And then again you'll drift off into abstraction. All of a sudden you're off and running. Don't worry about it. Just let go. Be very loose with it. But then come back to it sooner or later. Maybe in a second or a minute or an hour or a day or a week or a month or 20 years. But sooner or later you'll just come back to just, and just be feeling this field. And just sit with that. Just sit with that. Just let go into it. Completely just let go into it. And then, again, you'll probably find yourself drifting off. And that's the cycle. That's what the yoga of radiant presence looks like. And eventually you learn that drifting off into abstraction is not a departure from radiant presence, because of course abstraction is presence too. What else could it be? What would it be made of? Where would it be existing? How could it be appearing if it was not this radiance? So as we sit here and talk today and have lunch and do the various things we do, just from time to time, let yourself go to just feeling this field, the actual presence of this field, just unqualified. Just it's here, it's actual. Just feel it, you know. And again, you know, you drift off, get carried away. Don't worry about it. Let it go. Come back to it. Just keep coming back to it very gently. Keep coming back to it. Keep coming back to it. And that is the shortest path to realization. So during the course of the conversation or whatever we're doing, just sort of have that in the back of your mind. Just sort of just stay with this presence every once in a while. Don't get rigid about it. Don't try to cling to it, because that defeats it. That spins you off from it into abstraction, because there is no rigidity in it. It is not rigid. It is loose. It is creative. It is playful. It is spontaneous. It is mischievous. So when you're like that with it, you're in its mode and it welcomes you. You can sit in it that way. If you try and be stiff or rigid or, you know, no, I have to stay with the present, you know, you'll just spin off into total insanity. So just sort of keep that in the back of your mind and just come back to that from time to time when it occurs to you, during the course of the conversation, you know, when you're sitting or you find yourself spacing out or whatever, just feel this field from time to time. And that is the entirety of the yoga of radiant presence. Do not underestimate its profundity. It's a Trojan horse. Suppose you woke up and you found yourself in a room, and this room had one window. You walked up to the window and looked outside, and you noticed you seemed to be in a town. You looked around and you seemed to recognize, this looks a lot like Shattuck Avenue. It looks as though I'm in a second-story room of a building overlooking Shattuck and Berkeley. Feels very familiar. Then suppose you notice that this window you're looking at is actually a computer monitor. So you don't know where you are. You're seeing images that look as though they might be Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley, but it's a very different feeling of orientation from when you thought you were looking out a window at an objective world. And when you're just looking at a computer monitor, you're seeing forms, you're seeing shapes displayed, but you don't know. There's no depth to them. There's no implication of where they come from, what the relationship of it is. This is very much like the way our experience works. You look at your experience and you may think that you're seeing a world. You know, you're seeing a world, there seems to be people, there's buildings, there's rooms, there's trees, there's sky, there's clouds, there's weather, there's all these phenomena that take place in the world. What if somehow you were looking at some kind of a readout, some kind of a virtual reality display? Imagine some sort of an ultra high-tech movie display where the movie was so sharp and it completely surrounded you, and the sound was so clear and perfect stereophonic sound, and somehow it was a hookup so you had a sensation of touch and even smells and tastes. Would you be able to distinguish that if it was well enough done from the experience of a world, from your experience right now? Perhaps a clearer example is the example of a dream. When you're in a dream and you're just credulously thinking the dream, you're sucked into the dream, you're acting within the dream as if it was an actual world. You're in the dream and there's people you may be interacting with and situations you have to deal with, problems you have to solve, whatever, right? And all of a sudden you go lucid. You get, wait a minute, I'm dreaming. And it looks the same. People are still appearing, situations are still appearing, but you know that there's no world there. There's no people there. There's no situations there. It just looks as if there are. What does that feel like compared to what it feels like when you're thinking that it's an actual world that you're actually in? It feels very different, doesn't it? What does it feel like when you think you're looking out a window at a world that's actually there, or you're looking at a computer display? It feels very different, doesn't it? And likewise, most of us have the credulous relationship with our experience as if we know what it's based on, we know what it exists in. We may think that our experience is of a world, our experience is of other people, our experience is of situations, our experience is of circumstance. And these circumstances are out there, they matter, they're going on whether we're seeing them or not. They actually exist in their own right, and so we're sort of stuck in them and interacting with them and have to somehow deal with them in some way. That feels very different from if it was all just somehow some kind of a display, like a computer display, or a movie, or a dream, that looks very detailed. It looks the way it looks, but it's just appearance, it's just an apparition. There's nothing there, there's nothing behind it, it's not based on anything. With a computer display or a window, with a window you don't have direct access to the world, but it's an article of faith that there's a world there. If you discover it's a computer display, then you know that you can speculate that there's some kind of an electronic system generating the images, but you don't have direct access to that electronic system. But a dream is different, isn't it? Because in a dream, you actually have a direct access to what is generating the dream. You have direct access to sleep. You have direct access to consciousness. You have direct access to intelligence. Now, it may be a nebulous access. It may be an access that isn't entirely clear and rational and that you can think about and analyze, but nonetheless, you are in contact with it because you are directly participating with the sleep. You are both behind the scenes and experiencing the scene in a dream. You're experiencing the dream, and at the same time you're sleeping. You're the dreaming consciousness. You are outside the dream. You're what's doing the dream. So it's as though you have access to both sides of the computer display. You have access to what's being presented, and you have access to what's actually happening, what's actually presenting at this deep, unfathomable consciousness and intelligence that the sleeping consciousness, the dreaming consciousness is. Well, it turns out exactly the same thing is true of our waking experience. The waking experience is extremely detailed. It's extremely precise presentation of all sorts of characteristics in the field of vision, field of sound, field of touch, field of smell, taste, field of thought. All of these different presentations are very subtle and complex displays of apparent phenomena, circumstances, information, constantly changing complexities. And we may be in the habit of thinking, well, yeah, but it's all just somehow a reflection of a world that's out there that's somehow real and somehow doing it and somehow is what's actually happening. I'm just sort of have a little peephole that's looking at that actuality. But in actuality, it's not like that. In actuality, your experience is just like a dream in the sense that it is a presentation of qualities in consciousness, and there's nothing outside of it. There's nothing outside of your experience. There's nothing outside of the presentation. The presentation itself is a transcendental energy phenomena that it's self-sufficient, it's self-sustaining. It's not based on some other world. It's based on itself. It's based on what it's made of, which is consciousness, intelligence, so on and so forth. Of course, we have these words, consciousness, intelligence, as if we knew what that meant. But of course, these are mere labels, mere indicators for actualities that we have access to, but we cannot analyze them, we cannot describe them, we cannot define them. But that doesn't mean they are not actual, not accessible, not real. And the feeling tone is extremely different between looking at a window and looking at a computer display. You know, imagine a computer display that's so high resolution, it's indistinguishable from a window. It's just perfect technology, like they might have in 15 years or something. You know, just a crystal clear, ultra sharp display with no pixels or anything, just completely clear display. How could you tell that display from a window? How could you tell? If you didn't have some kind of a context, you wouldn't be able to. You wouldn't have a basis for telling. But what's the feeling? What's the difference in the feeling of thinking, oh, I'm looking out a window and believing that? That feels a certain way. I'm looking at a world that's there, versus I'm just looking at a display, at images that are based on I have no idea what. It feels very different, doesn't it? It feels very different to be looking at just a display as opposed to having the feeling you're looking on a world that is actually out there, that is actually self-sufficient, that is actually there when you're not seeing it. And the difference in that feeling is exactly the difference between spiritual confusion and spiritual realization. What it feels like to be with your experience, interpreting it as being embedded in all sorts of assumed worlds and assumed implications and assumed cause and effect and assumed history and all these sorts of things, is what confusion feels like, is what so-called spiritual bondage feels like, is what delusion feels like. And simply seeing, being with the instantaneous presence of the actuality of experience, this instantaneously present energy that is just here, very precisely, just in the moment, just always in the present moment, shining from nowhere, conveying all sorts of implications and meaningfulnesses, but and multidimensionality, but based on nothing, just here, just like a dream, just here. It feels very different. What is here? Well, if we take a catalog, an inventory, we might say, well, the Hillside Club is here, other people are here, the lights are here, your body is here, right? Your thoughts are here, your emotions are here, whatever other sort of little subtle experiential flavors that are floating around in the background is here. All these things are here. And this is what we usually focus on. If you say, what's going on, you would answer, well, I'm sitting in the Hillside Club and there's, I'm sitting on it in a gold-colored chair and there's a bunch of people around me and there's a talk going on. And that's how we usually relate to our experience, as having all these various conditions present. Of course, we're there too, but we usually just assume that's transparent. We usually assume, well, of course I was there, because I'm always here. But is any of that really true? What is really here, right now? I mean, I don't mean philosophically, I mean in actuality. What is it that is really here? Suppose you're dreaming. Suppose you're dreaming, let's say you're dreaming you're standing in Times Square and you're talking to somebody. So in that case, what's there? Well, it looks like Times Square is there, the person you're talking to is there, your body in the dream is there, and you're having a conversation and you may be thinking things and feeling things and all that seems to be there too. But then you wake up and you realize none of that was really there. It was a dream. Nothing was there. What was actually there when you were dreaming? What was there? Dreaming was there. Just dreaming. What is here right now? What is it that's actually here? What's actually here is, we could call it experiencing. Is actually here. What is that? Well, we usually think experiencing is just a constant in the equation. We don't even think about it. We're not interested in the fact of experiencing. We're interested in what's happening, what's going on, where we are, what the action is, right? What the story is, what the engagement is, what's the punchline, But in actuality, what is here is nothing other than experiencing. You can't be certain about any of the rest of it. You know that you're in the Hillside Club because you're having an experience which you're calling being in the Hillside Club. What does that experience consist of? It consists of, you might say, patterns of light in your vision, right? You know you're at a talk because you're experiencing me here talking, which is, in your field of vision is, say, patterns of light changing, and your field of hearing is, sounds that you're considering to be words. In your field of thought, you may be having thoughts that you think of as being about the words that you think you're hearing, and so on and so forth. But all of these are just qualifications of present experience. The experience is what is actually here. The experiencing is the thing that is present. And whether or not it's a Hillside Club, whether or not it's your body, whether or not it's your thoughts, whether or not it's other people and all that, is just interpretations of this present experience. Experience is a thing. We usually think of it as kind of like a window we're looking through, and we're much more interested in what we're looking at than the window. I mean, who cares about windows except window designers? People are interested in what you're seeing through the window, right? But all that there is here is the window. All that there is here is experiencing itself. And what we think is happening is just interpretations of what that experiencing seems to look like. So what is this experiencing that is present? What is it? It's something. Something's happening here, right? Your experience is obviously real, right? It's happening. It's ongoing. What is it? What is this? It's present, right? I mean, its undeniable and most obvious quality probably is that it is present. It's here. It's apparent. It is showing up. You don't need to go to it. You don't need to say, where's my experience? I left it around here somewhere. It's not like that, is it? It shines forth like a spotlight shining at you. And it presents itself as all of these qualities, right? All of these colors and shapes and lights and sounds and feelings and textures and nuances of thought and emotion and all different sorts of, characteristics that are apparently present. What are these characteristics made of? What is experience made of? And it's very subtle, it's very slippery, isn't it? What is thought made of? What is vision made of? What is touch made of? It is if you look very closely, you'll find it's a subtle, instantaneous, sort of an energy presence. It's very dynamic. It sort of tingles. It has a little sparkle to it, a little tingle. You look at light, and it's shining, it's sparkling, right? It's sizzling in your field of vision. You look at your thoughts. What is thought? If you just look at thought, what's a thought made of? What's the stuff of thought? Well, it's very subtle, isn't it? It's very tenuous, but it's not nothing, because you can tell it's there. When you're thinking, something is there, or you wouldn't know, you wouldn't be experiencing anything. You experience something when you're thinking, right? So what is it? Again, it's a subtle kind of a little tingling presence, isn't it? The same with sound. Sound could be described as kind of a buzzing presence, or a zzz. It's a vibratory presence, and it's dynamic, isn't it? If sound wasn't dynamic, you wouldn't hear anything. If it was just, it's moving, it's vibrating, it's pulsating. Light, likewise. Light is it's alive, it's vibrating, it's scintillating. Thought is the same way. Again, thought is difficult to look at because it is so subtle. But thought's a lot like light, isn't it? It's sort of a little sort of a scintillating, subtle sort of a vaporous flavor or something that's present. But if you look at what is actually present as you experience, you will find it's one thing. Just like if you look at a dream and you notice you're dreaming, what is a dream? What is dreaming? What is the stuff of a dream? It's one thing. A dream's one thing. If you see someone in a dream and you hear someone in a dream, the seeing and the hearing aren't two different things. It's all just the same dreaming. It's all just one thing present that has a range of sort of apparent characteristics that it can seem to appear in, right? And isn't the same thing true here? Your field of vision is present in the same way as your field of hearing, which is present in the same way as your field of touch, which is present in the same way as your field of thought, and so on and so forth, right? And you can feel these things, you can explore these things because they are present. They are actual. You are already engaged with them. They're right here. You don't need to go to them. You don't even need to look for them. They're very obvious, right? They shine forth. They're very clear and concrete in your experience, right? Your experience is your engagement with your experience is you're already in complete contact with your experience, right? There's no gap between you and your experience, is there? It's not like your experience is over here somewhere and you're like somewhere way over here and you have to build a bridge every time you want to experience something. It's not like that, is it? It's here. It's like how far, when you're dreaming, how far away is the dream? Well, you're in it, aren't you? I mean, it's right here. You're already completely, intimately engaged with it. And likewise, here's your experience. I'm not talking about abstractions. This is your experience right here, right now, isn't it? I mean, just look at it. Look, this is your experience. It's really happening, isn't it? It's present. And it is immediately present, right? You're completely engaged, and you can't not be engaged in your experience, can you? You can't turn it off. You can't make it go away. I mean, you could drift off to sleep or something, or take some drugs or something, but you'd still be experiencing. It would just be a different quality, a different texture. Sleep is an experience. It's just a different, apparition, a different presentation of experience, isn't it? But you can explore what this experience is, not by analysis, not by thinking about it, because that just generates abstraction, but you can explore it textually. You can explore it by feeling it. Like how do you explore water? You put your hand in it, you put your foot in it, you get in it and swim around, and then you know very intimately what water is. It's not a thought, it's not an abstraction, is it? It's very concrete. But a person who's never seen water, who's never been swimming, is going to have a very different idea of what water is than you do if you've been in it, if you've had a bath, if you've gone swimming, right? And this is not an abstraction. It's not an idea. It's not, I've had it described to me. I can really talk about it. It's not like that, is it? You know about water very, very, very intimately, texturally, through immersion, through direct contact. And likewise, you can know about your experience, what your experience actually is, through direct contact. Now, this is valuable and important for one reason. Your experience is real. It's actual. So getting to know what it is getting to know what you are, getting to know what's really going on here. All of these abstractions and descriptions of what your experience is are not real. They're not true. They're concepts. You're not in the Hillside Club. You're not in Berkeley. There are no other people around you. You're not in your body. That's not what's actually happening. What's actually happening is the field of your experience. That you may be used to describing in those terms, but those descriptions are abstractions. They are not concretely true. Whereas the presence of the full field of your experience is a concrete, undeniable, objective fact. It's the only fact. It's the only objective reality, is the fact of your experience. So getting to know your experience through direct textual engagement, through feeling it, through exploring it non-conceptually, irrationally, through just being with the textures of it, is very fruitful, because you can come to know what you are, you can come to know what this is, and what this actually is and what you actually are turns out to be profoundly valuable and extremely powerful, vastly more so than the normal misunderstanding of, we're humans, we're sort of evolved primates, sort of clever monkeys who wander around on some tiny dot of a planet in some little corner of some galaxy somewhere off in a small portion of the universe. I mean, that abstraction is useless. It's disempowering. It's belittling. You are the totality of reality. The sun exists because it appears in your experience. The sun is a very small part of you. Berkeley exists because it appears in your experience. The human race exists because it appears in your experience. So you're bigger than the human race. You're bigger than the planet Earth. You're bigger than Berkeley. You're bigger than the sun. You are an actuality that is drastically different, drastically divergent from what people usually think they are, and from what people usually talk about themselves and us as being. And so discovering this fact directly and exploring it directly is very empowering, and turns out to be liberating too. Because another aspect of what you actually are, what this field of experience actually is it's eternal. It's outside of time. Space and time exist inside of your experience. Your experience doesn't exist in space and time. Your experience exists, and space and time appear within it. So the fact that you're outside of space and time is very interesting. That means, among other things, you were never born. You're not going to die. That's kind of interesting information if you think about it, compared to the way we normally approach our situation. And many, many other implications, because also not only is it outside space and time, but it's infinite. This is very interesting. Infinite sounds like an abstraction. It sounds like a nebulosity. It sounds like just some kind of hyperbole. It's like infinity is like, whatever. But infinity is an actuality. Infinity means without limit, without boundary, without ultimate definition, without bottomless, you might say. Well, bottomless is hard to imagine, because you imagine like a cliff or a ravine like the Grand Canyon, imagine, well, it's really deep. Imagine it was deeper. And you imagine, okay, it's bottomless. You can't really imagine bottomless. You can get to really, 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 really deep, sort of so that the bottom is just sort of so far down there that it's irrelevant, but still somewhere there's a bottom. But think of bottomless, like just no bottom at all, just no bottom. Think of outer space. They call it free fall. Suppose you're just heading away from Earth at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and if you don't hit another star, you're not going to hit anything forever. You're just falling forever. And that's actually very true to what your situation actually is right now, because there is no walls to your experience. There's no floor to your experience. Your experience is not sitting on something. Your experience is not sitting in something. Everything whatsoever is in your experience, or it's nowhere. And your experience is beyond what appears within it. All of this is directly knowable, directly experienceable, simply by looking and seeing what is actually concretely present as this amazing fact that we call experience. And you will be able to see what it is as long as you can approach it outside of the context of what you have been taught it is and what our philosophies and so on generally hold it to be. What I call this that is present, I call it radiant presence. Not because it is that, but because that indicates in a very profound way some of its major characteristics. It's radiant. By radiant, I don't mean just light or glowing. I mean that it dynamically shines forth. It dynamically projects itself. Experience comes to you, doesn't it? It's not sitting out there inertly. You don't have to go to it. Bang, it jumps out at you, right? Your field of vision is, bang, it's here in your experience dynamically, instantaneously. Same with thought, same with sensation. All of these things jump forth continually in real time. So I coined this property radiance and presence because it is present. This is probably the prime characteristic of experience, is that it is present. Which is it's a synonym for actual. And actual means objectively existent, here, undeniable, in your face, so to speak, in the more street vernacular. So anyway, and I call this exploration the yoga of radiant presence. And I commend it to you as a very valuable and fascinating vehicle of exploration that is the exploration and discovery of what this is, what you actually are. And the fruit of that investigation is profound and astounding. Very easy to misunderstand actuality. What is actual? What is real? What is actually here? And importantly, what is not actually here? What is not real? I think typically human beings have an enormous misunderstanding around both of these issues. The very essence of spirituality is discovering actuality. Actuality is, of course, already the case. It is what is actual. It is what is here. It is this actual condition that is present, that is always present, that's never not present. And, of course, you are this condition. You are embedded in this condition. This condition is you, is doing you. You are made of this condition. But it's very difficult within a modern human context to understand this, because there is such a gross, heavy-handed misunderstanding of actuality that permeates modern culture. So what is actual? What is actually here? You know, when you look at what is here, what seems to you to be here? How do you answer that question? How do you approach that issue? It's easy to sum up very approximately what's actual by the word experience. The experience is here. Clearly, experience is occurring. Is anything else occurring? Anything other than experience?
Experiencing.
Experiencing, sure. Experiencing. So what is experience? I mean, here it is. We have this nice word experience, and we all sort of know vaguely or very directly what it refers to. But what do we mean? What exactly do we mean by this experience? What precisely is this experience? Well, it's experience. Well, okay, that doesn't take us very far. Experience is patterns appearing in your consciousness. Try that on for size. So what are these patterns? What is this consciousness? And that gets very slippery and strange very quickly, because try looking for consciousness. Try to locate consciousness. Try to pin down exactly what consciousness is. Well, it's self-evident that what we may sort of sloppily think of as the function of consciousness is occurring. This experience is being experienced. So if consciousness is that which experiences experience, then obviously it's engaged, okay, it's in gear. But you can't find it. You go looking for consciousness, you don't really find anything other than the empirical fact that experiencing is ongoing, and you can't deconstruct it. You don't get very far trying to find consciousness. So, okay, let's go look at the other direction. If experience is patterns appearing in consciousness and we can't find consciousness, what do we get when we look for the patterns? Well, there's a lot of information there, isn't there? There's all the sense fields. There's the field of vision with all of these colors and brightnesses and lights and shapes and so on. Field of hearing with all of these different pitches and loudnesses and audio textures and so on. Field of sensation, and that's a whole universe of a range of energetic presence. Taste, smell, thought. Thought is a fascinating field of experience. You know, what is the range of phenomena within thought? You know, it's amazing. It's amazing, and it's very subtle. But aside from this sort of cataloging of these different categories of what we can say seems to be present as these patterns of experience, what are they? What are they made of? How do they appear? And it gets very slippery. asking that question gets very slippery. It's very subtle. What's appearing, how it's appearing, even if it's appearing. So we can't really pin down consciousness. We can't really pin down the substance of this patterning, even though, which is surprising because it's so explicit and so detailed. You know, you look at your field of vision, for example, or any sense field, and there's just so much precise detail. I mean, things appear exactly the way they appear, exactly in the way that they appear, and it's just an astounding range of a really great deal of specificity, right? But you go looking at any of this specificity, try and isolate it, try and pin it down, it's that, but what exactly is that? And all of a sudden it gets strange. Even in the face of this precision, this specificity of what presents itself, nothing is really definable exactly as to what it is. I mean, it's easy to see color, so here Fritz is wearing a very red shirt. Okay, great, there's red. But then what exactly is red? And what exactly is this red, not just red in the abstract, this specific reds? Well, first of all, there's an infinite range of reds present in this shirt. It's not just one color, it's a range, it's a gradation, it's an infinite gradation of colors, of brightnesses, of textures. And it's immediately recognizable as red, but what is it that is recognized? What exactly is red? And it gets subtle, it gets nuanced, it gets interesting that you can't actually find red and somehow grasp it, find the final redness. Yeah, I got it, red is red. It's easy to recognize red, but you can't finally determine what is being recognized, how it's being recognized, anything about it really. So, looking at the two, let's say, arbitrary poles of experience, we have consciousness and patterning appearing. Consciousness is nebulous in the extreme, essentially unfindable. And the patternings are explicit, they are wild with differentiation, literally infinitely full of information. It's an entire information overload, your sense fields, the amount of data and the quality and the precision of that data that's being presented. But none of it actually resolves to anything. None of it is findable, except in its presence. It is present. It is actual. And it is conveying characteristics, conveying information. And again, even though this information and characteristics are not ultimately resolvable, they are nonetheless completely obvious. Typically, we're used to being very interested in the patterns that appear. Well, here these patterns are people, this pattern is a room, this pattern is a city, this pattern is a floor, this pattern is a recorder, this pattern is a cup of tea, this pattern is my body, that pattern is your body, some other body, and so on and so forth. We're typically very interested in orienting towards our experience in terms of classifying all these patterns and then assuming that they're actual, more or less discrete entities, and then relating to them in those terms, navigating around as if it was a game, like Monopoly. Monopoly, you have, here's the game board, and here's the pieces, and these are the hotels, and this is the money, and the object of the game is to accumulate the money, and you roll the dice, and you go around the board, and you build hotels, and blah, blah, blah. So, typically we have a similar little, typically unconscious game structure going on in our minds about, well, here's the people, they're the sort of the players, the pieces in this game, and my body's a piece in the game, and the clothes I wear is a piece in the game, and there's, more or less elaborate rules of behaving and juxtaposing in terms of these various game pieces to go through life and play this game. And so we're typically relating to our situation this way. And that's what we generally consider as important. What's important is the game. What's important is our classification of these sub-aspects of the fields of our experience. People and places and things and ownership and all of these things. But none of that's actual. What's actual is the appearance of patterning. What's actual is experience itself. And we make a leap of abstraction when we interpret the experience as being of people, of an environment, of situations, that can be successes or failures or, whatever sort of classification we have of it. And we typically ignore the fact of experience itself. Experience is just sort of the medium within which this elaborate gamesmanship takes place. And yet, experience is the only thing actually here. These classifications are abstractions. Essentially, they're imaginary. They don't actually exist discretely. Because all classifications, or let's say all classifying of a field of experience, is infinitely variable. In other words, how many... So here's my field of vision. Let's suppose this field of vision is a pie. How many slices can I slice this pie into? Well, as many or as few as I want. I can count the number of human bodies that I'm seeing in this room. I can see a room and a not room by looking out the windows. I can look at my own body. I can look at the parts of my body while I have 4 limbs and a head. I can look at my hairs while I have, X 100,000 hairs. I can look at the cells in one hair. Well, there's X 100,000 cells in that one hair. I can look at the mitochondria in one of those cells. Well, there's, So it's fractally full of information on every level, and it's completely arbitrary where you draw the lines. What's an entity? Well, I'll draw a line around this and say what's inside this line is me, and what's outside the line is not me. Or I take a hair and I say, well, okay, what's inside the line is the hair, and what's outside the line is not the hair. Well, is the hair me or not? I don't know. However you want to spin it. Yeah, it's me. Okay, but that's your hair. So there is the actuality of all of this information present, and the information is infinitely differentiated. In other words, you can find a basis for saying this is different than that on any scale you look. You can say this body's different than that, this person's different than that person, this side of the room's different than that side of the room, this molecule's different than that molecule, this atom is different than that atom. Or you can dolly back and say, oh, this is my body, it's one thing. Oh, this is the system of this social interaction, it's one thing. Or, oh, this is the city, it's one thing. Oh, this is the biosphere of the planet, it's one thing. Or, this is the solar system, it's one thing. This is the galaxy, it's one thing. So it's just all of these ways of differentiating these apparent subsystems within experience are just abstractions. In other words, they're imaginary. You aren't actually slicing the pie, you're just sketching out the lines that you could. So I could slice the pie into 4 pieces. I could slice the pie into 8 pieces. I could slice the pie into 365,000.2 pieces, or whatever. But it's all hypothetical. So what's actual? What's actual is the pie. There are no slices. The pie is what's actual. And in terms of that sort of pathetic metaphor, the pie is this field of experience, this field of your experience, which is actual. It alone exists. It alone can be found. It does have the property of a degree of intelligent analysis being present spontaneously. How is that present? I mean, that's a part of experience. What's intelligence? Where does intelligence come from? How does that work? I don't know. It's just here. You can't get it like everything else. Every other aspect of experience, it can't actually be found. It can't actually be differentiated or defined. But it's self-evidently effective. So there is this, in experience, there is this looking at experience. That is an exercise of intelligence. There is a potential for differentiating or analyzing or hypothetically considering what experience is and what's going on that spontaneously occurs within experience. This is an actuality that we all have direct experience of. It's self-evidently the case. Can't find what it is, but it is, whatever it is. It is an effect. Working well?
Yeah, the sound on Justin TV isn't very good.
What kind of not good?
It's too low. Jeff said maybe change it to external.
No, you want audio. It is on external.
Mic external.
It is on external. Just slide it up a bit.
See, this is too low.
Yeah,
it is too low.
He said we fixed it last time by changing the audio device from PC mic to Peter's mic.
I want to see this one. Make sure this is. See, we didn't select the camera.
Well, the camera's on. That's not an issue.
No, it has to be HP webcam.
I think it's liable to distort now. Hey, it's not my problem. It can be very interesting to redirect your attention from orienting towards all these differentiations that we're all so used to do, and we all do it unconsciously. Everyone around us seems to be doing the same thing. To orienting towards the fact of this experience itself, as it is, and what it is. It can be very disorienting at first, because it can seem like a sort of an amorphous, jelly-like sea of dysfunctionality. You can feel like, I'm not calling anything, I can't tell where anything is. And yet that's not really true either, because intelligence doesn't go away. You can still stand up and walk around the room, even if you're not thinking of it as a room and thinking of it as walking. Functioning turns out to be a direct, inherent aspect of experience. So it doesn't actually depend upon all this differentiation and classifying that we're so used to doing. And something very interesting happens when you do this, when you begin to orient towards experience as the actuality rather than a world and people and classifications as the actuality. Your sense of what you are, your sense of what this is, undergoes a radical shift. You discover there is only one thing present, and you are it. You discover that there is no world, or that there's nothing but world, and you are it. You discover that all of this is doing itself. There is no strategizing required. There's no planning required. You discover that this is beyond space and time. This is eternal. apparent space and time occurs within experience. Experience does not occur within space and time. We all have very clear and obvious experience of this when we dream. You're in a dream, and you're in some situation. Say you're in New York City, or flying through the clouds or whatever, and you wake up and poof, where was the space that appeared in the dream? There was no actual space. New York City didn't actually appear. I mean, it did appear, but there was no, and it seemed to be spatial. It seemed to be big. It seemed to have a spatial extension, and yet there's nothing there. Or it certainly wasn't that anyway. There seemed to be time, but we all know that time can pass very differently in a dream than in a waking world. You can go to sleep for 2 minutes and have a dream that seems to last hours or days or whatever, or vice versa. So space and time occur within dreams, but the dreams are not spatial and temporal. The dreams generate space and time. And likewise, experience does exactly the same thing. Your experience right now probably seems to be spatial. You seem to be within a space. Your body seems to be within a space. So there's certainly an apparent space presenting itself in your experience. But your experience is that condition within which this space is appearing, and your experience is not subject to that space. It's not limited to that space. It's completely non-spatial. It's not bigger, or for that matter smaller. It's just non-spatial. It's not a spatial condition. Not in the sense that so-called physical space is a spatial condition. And the same with time. So again, we discover these possibly rather startling results when we reorient towards experience as the actuality, rather than all of these classifications and subsystems and entities and environments and objects as the actuality. Spacelessness, timelessness, integrity, it's always one thing, it never departs from itself. Invulnerability, experience itself cannot be hurt. Apparent hurt can occur within experience, but experience cannot be damaged. It's like a forest fire that shows up on TV doesn't burn the TV set. Experience is like that. Pain can appear within experience, but experience itself is not hurt. Experience cannot be improved. It cannot be diminished. You can't make experience more. You can't make it less. Experience is a constancy. It is essentially invulnerable. It's inviolable. It never departs from itself. And you are it. You are nothing but it. There is no separate you or separate anything from experience itself. And this is actually not abstraction. This is very concrete, a concrete fact that is immediately discovered in relating to the actuality of experience as what is present, in contradistinction to relating to all the classifications like we typically may do with human beings and people and objects and situations and time and history and past and future. For example, an experience is the obvious fact that there's no past. There's no past. Experience is this right here. There's no future. Experience is this right here. It's completely obvious from an experiential point of view. But from a differentiation point of view, it's like, no, wait a minute, what do you mean? I was a kid and I was born in New York and I grew up in Connecticut and I this and I that. It's like, yeah, sure. There's all of that interpretation. But when is that interpretation happening? Right now. Where is it happening? Right here. So my entire history exists right here, or nowhere at all. My expectations in my future. I'm getting old. I'm going to get older sooner or later. I'll get sick or something and die. When is that? All of that thought is happening right now. And where is it happening? Right here. And then since I look at now and here, and they turn out not to be actual, it gets very interesting indeed. So It's not even here and now. Here isn't actually here, and now isn't actually now. But it's not anything other than that either. It's essentially unclassifiable. So this is the most remarkable, and from a spiritual point of view, the most powerful fact that is revealed in relating to experience itself, is its transcendental nature. It has absolutely no limitations. It cannot be found as anything. It is not limited to being this or that. It's not limited to even being or not being. It's not limited in any regard whatsoever. And since you discover that you are that, that's an interesting feeling indeed. Because what you are, you discover very directly and non-conceptually and self-verifyingly, is absolute transcendental inconceivability, invulnerable beyond space and time, and full of fascinating information, exploration, displays of meaningfulness. So, in practical terms, what do you do? How do you do this? How do you play with this? How do you explore this in an efficient and simple manner? It sounds interesting and sort of in the abstract, or being put as a philosophy or an assertion. I mean, I'm sitting up here talking and I'm explaining all this stuff, and it's like, okay, cool. You know, maybe you follow it, maybe you don't, but whatever. So what? So it turns out there is a very practical and a very simple. I mean, there's lots and lots of ways to approach this, but I've discovered there's a very practical and very efficient way to approach it, which I call the yoga of radiant presence, which is an arbitrary designation I gave it, which is meaningful in many regards, but not particularly important. But aside from that, what it actually is very simple. It is essentially noticing the fact that experience is already happening. In other words, feeling experience, feeling the fact of experience. And when I say feeling it, I mean feeling it textually, feeling it the way you might feel the temperature of a bathtub by putting your hand in the water. It's not a thought, it's not an idea, it's a direct energy engagement. You put your hand in the water and you feel it, and you have a flood of irrational, very direct, non-conceptual information. Likewise, here is experience. It is presenting itself like a symphony. It's presenting itself as a richness of immediate characteristics. And the experiencing is already completely intimately engaged with experience. It's already, there's nothing to be done. It's not like you need to engage with your experience. Like, how do you not engage with your experience? There's no off switch, right? You can't stop seeing, you can't stop hearing. It just doesn't happen. So, it's even simpler than engaging with your experience. You simply notice the profundity of the way in which experiencing is already engaged with itself. So it's a no-brainer. You just, but it's very intimate. It's absolutely inclusive. There's nothing excluded from your experience. Your experience instantaneously experiences fully everything that it's experiencing exactly as it's experiencing it. Right? Like I may say, oh, I'm looking at you, but in actuality, everything that's appearing in my field of vision is already appearing with complete intimacy in exactly the way it is. Now, sure, things over here on the side of my field of vision are appearing a little more fuzzy, let's say, but that's exactly how it is. That fuzziness is what is there. That's an actuality, this fuzziness. Can experience be fuzzy? Well, sure, obviously. Can it be sharper? Well, sure, obviously. Can it be this? Can it be that? Well, sure, obviously. It can be whatever it can be, but that's irrelevant. It is what it is already. And simply feeling that full field of presence is what experience itself is. So this is extremely simple. Just notice, and again, it's already the case. It's already happening. You are already completely engaged with your experience on every level. You're already experiencing everything you're experiencing. It's not like you need to do it. You can't not do it. So it's simply, you could call it noticing, or just in an instant. Is experience here? Yeah, experience is here. Feel it. Just across the board, just feel it. And that is experience. You can't say what it is, can you? When you feel it, you can't say what it is. You start thinking about it, then you can start saying a lot of about what you're thinking about. But experience itself, you can't say. You can feel it, you can know it, you can participate with it most intimately, but you can't say what it is. You can't pin it down, you can't define it. And yet it's not stupid. It's profoundly intelligent and nuanced and meaningful and subtle. It just has dimensions and layers of implication and meaningfulness. But not rational meaningfulness, not a meaningfulness you can put directly into words, but like a pregnancy, a fullness, a lusciousness. To me, I say it's a lot like listening to a symphony. Just all of these amazing, unexpected textures and strains and qualities present on a dynamic basis, sort of wafting in and out, and the attention sort of spontaneously drifts to this portion or that portion of it, and things sort of come up as a focus of attention and drift back, but it's just all present as this amazing richness that is one field, and yet doesn't particularly make any sense, isn't particularly coherent, and yet it has a great sort of a beauty and meaningfulness and interrelationship in many ways in it that sort of come out like chords or like say musical strings or something. And listening to symphonies like that, you could think, this was recorded by Johann Strauss in the year of such and such, and it's like all this abstraction. So you can just feel the music, and it's something, it's just this amazing fullness of actuality. And that is sufficient. You don't need to know who wrote it. You don't need to know what city they wrote it in. You don't need to know the name of the year. You don't need to know all these abstractions, because the reality speaks for itself. It is what it is. And our experience is exactly like that. It is what it is. And that turns out to be not just sufficient, but everything. Turns out to be the whole point, the whole goal of the spiritual quest is simply the fullness of what is present right here, right now, as your experience. And you're already experiencing it. So, it's not like you need a labor to get to the goal. You need a labor to get to this fullness. The fullness is already here. You just need to notice it. And it's not like, let me sit down and notice. Just notice, it's just like, bang. Well, here it is. Is it here? Yeah. Is your field of experience here? Yeah, it is. So, and that actuality, just the simple fact of that actuality, is both the highest spiritual path and also the goal of spirituality. And, at first, if you were a novice to this kind of a thing, you might say, yeah, that's kind of weird, but, so what? But just hang out with it, You acclimatize. We're so used to relating to things in terms of our mental gamesmanship and our classification. Just hang out in this rich textural presence of experience, and you'll develop a sensitivity to it. You'll develop an appreciation of subtlety, an appreciation of non-linearity, an appreciation of the profundity of what is present in these very strange, non-linear, but actual ways.